Marvel's Avengers. Where this game really failed was giving us that superhero fantasy that we were looking forward to. While the combat is nice and the heroes themselves play uniquely, everything else just is kind of generic and boring, and it doesn't give us unique and cool locations that fans can gush over. We don't get a whole lot of villains and great encounters. The mission variety and the objectives, all of these things just... This doesn't feel like a superhero game. It feels like any other generic looter, but with a superhero skin added on top. And that's where I think this game failed most. And that's why people have kind of been driven away by it. And as far as the roadmap goes, I've kind of detailed this already. We are past the Red Room takeover, and we're going to get into all this stuff with War for Wakanda being the next major expansion that fans hope will go a long way in helping revitalize this game. It certainly seems to be the last chance this game has, but I'm not entirely confident that the expansion will be able to bring this game back. Now, one thing I want to highlight in this video is the player base, which is becoming dangerously low. It was dangerously low before, but more so now. Now, you're gonna see a couple of articles stating that Marvel's Avengers player count on Steam has dropped to 0 multiple times, and this was something that this Reddit user pointed out. The player base on PC is no more. Damn, this is crazy. So let's actually take a look at the chart. I don't think that this is entirely true in the sense that I don't think there was a point where the player base literally dropped to 0. If we look at the chart here, you'll see the points where the drop to 0 happened. So this is one of them, May 31st at 9 p.m. on Monday, dropped to 0. Here's another one, June 1st, dropped to 0. And then finally on Monday, June 7th, it dropped to 0. So 3 instances in the past month where this happened. And this right here, June 1st, was on a Tuesday, and then these other 2 times it was on a Monday. While the player base of this game is in a severely low state, the drops to 0, some people are saying might have likely been a glitch. Either that or there was some maintenance that forced them to take the game offline for like an hour, something along those lines. And I'm inclined to agree, because if you look at the chart, the way the player base drops to 0, it's very strange. You can see that the player base here is rising, and then suddenly there is a drop to 0, and then everything goes back to normal. And then for the next one, there is a downwards trend, but it's almost like the player base gets cut off here, and then the pattern resumes as normal. And then right here, once again, we see an upwards trend followed by the player base dropping to 0, then things going back to normal. If the player base naturally goes to 0, you would see a downwards trend that kind of transitions there. So if you look at Artifact, for example, you can see a couple points where the player base dropped to 0 because, I mean, this game just utterly failed completely, and you can see that the times that the game's player base dropped to 0 here look a lot more natural in how the chart kind of flows into 0. Save for maybe this one occasion here where there's a rising trend and then 0 and then back to 44. But every other instance here, for example, you can see the player rises, then naturally drops to 0. For Artifact, I can definitely believe it because we're looking at a player base of double digits. With Marvel's Avengers, we're still at triple digits. So it's not in such a dire state that the player base is constantly dropping to 0, but we are seeing some of the lowest numbers yet as far as player base goes. Just looking at the past 7 days, you can see that at one point, the player base dropped to below 300. And just to give you an idea for what that means, at 300 players, if we divide that by 4, which is, let's say all 300 players are engaging in 4-player co-op, we're looking at basically 75 sessions. That's it for this Avengers game, which is really, really bad. But again, if we zoom in here, you can see that the drop to 0 happens in an irregular way. Even if you look at a successful game like Destiny 2, you can see occasional drops to 0, like here, for example, on May 12th. And this is a game that every month draws in an average of like 70,000 players or so, tens of thousands of players. The player base here is definitely very healthy compared to Marvel's Avengers. That's not to say that Marvel's Avengers isn't in a place right now where it's in great danger of its player base dropping to 0. Just recently, one of the only people still covering Marvel's Avengers, Forbes' Paul Tassi, straight up just said that he's run out of patience for Outriders and Marvel's Avengers, Outriders being another broken launch that has a solid foundation and good gameplay, but the issues still plague the game. But for Avengers specifically, Paul Tassi believes that he does not think the game A has the capability to become a true live service with meaningful content updates many times a year constructed around an engaging grind, and B, I do not think Square Enix is going to let Crystal Dynamics linger on continuing to make the content for the game much past year 1, unless the fall-free Black Panther expansion is somehow absurdly transformative for the game and player base, which I highly doubt it will be. One can hope, but I really don't think the Black Panther expansion will save this game. I don't think it'll be such a drastic overhaul of kind of a flawed foundation that it will ultimately bring players back, and there's only so long Square Enix can keep this up before this game becomes a financial liability. At one point, they'll have to shut this game down, and I don't think that scenario's too far off. And this article also notes how the player base has dipped below 300 players last night on Steam, and just how bad that is for a live service for a looter like Marvel's Avengers, whose lifeblood is the players. Without the players, this game will starve to death. But beyond media outlets' interest in this game fading away, the community continues to protest. So this right here is one of the more upvoted posts over the last week, and the headline reads, "I'm loving the XP boosters. I'm glad they listened to us and added them," which is sarcastic. Recall that not long ago they said that they were planning to slow down XP progression because they felt that players were being overwhelmed by leveling up too fast, when the reality was that leveling characters up was one of the good aspects of this game, because combat only gets interesting when you unlock all of the hero's abilities, so slowing down progression was just counterintuitive to the fun factor of this game. But after making that excuse of we feel like players are getting overwhelmed, they are, after slowing down progression, adding XP boosters. This all obviously sends mixed messages and is making people suspicious of developers' intentions. Obviously that creates the perception that there's some kind of monetization scheme in the works here, something along those lines. But more importantly, these kinds of tweaks is not what the game needs right now. And as the meme here sarcastically points out, the developers are not prioritizing the stuff people do want: accessibility features, finishing the ping system, fixing bugs, multiplayer content, emote wheel, and are prioritizing slowing down XP progression and then adding XP boosters to counterbalance that for some reason. There's talk here of a useless champion system. The champion system essentially allows heroes to be leveled up further and unlock new skills, but people aren't pleased with the implementation of that. There's mention on focus on single-player content in a multiplayer-centric game. The Red Room, for example, I believe that's basically purely single-player stuff, and then bring back the Mega Hive, which is basically 40 floors or something worth of doing the same repetitive tasks over and over and over again. And there came a point where people were complaining, "We heard your feedback about Mega Hives, we're looking to reduce the time it takes for you to complete the Mega Hive in an upcoming patch." But the issue, the core issue with this mode wasn't the length of it, it's the fact that it was too boring to play alone, because you cannot play this in multiplayer, you cannot do co-op with this. Is it too much to ask that an online multiplayer-focused game has online multiplayer missions? It's one thing if you're gonna add like new story content for the single-player campaign or for the core campaign, but for things outside of that, all of that should be playable in multiplayer format, given this is mainly a live service looter co-op game. But even that is something that this game is not succeeding at. There are posts poking fun at the fact that something as basic as an emote wheel in a looter game that has a bunch of emotes isn't implemented in the game yet. There are complaints surrounding the skins that have released for the game and how skins seem to be what they're focused on right now instead of developing new content, or if they are developing new content, it's happening so slowly, whereas the skins are kind of coming out consistently, which creates the perception that there's more of a focus on those skins, which are easier to develop than the content, but without the content there to reinforce the gameplay loop that will motivate players to earn those skins, you know, the skins just don't matter. But beyond that, the quality of skins is something that people are not happy about. This user highlights a quote from Crystal Dynamics that reads, "Our cosmetics designer spent a lifetime reading comics. in regards to how the plan is to make sure that the skins are all referenced from the comics and that there's a lot of cool stuff for the comics fans. But instead, we've gotten skins like this Hulk cowboy costume that references nothing. And you've got all this material here to work with, all these cool skins that you could give Hulk, but instead you're getting random stuff like a cowboy version of Hulk for no reason, stuff that isn't really all that exciting. And this is all on top of everything surrounding the Red Room event, where players would be awarded nameplates instead of the skins that were designed for this event. So the rewards of this event were not compelling. The actual costumes were locked behind the marketplace with no gameplay path towards earning them. And so people posted stuff like this: can we please get loot rewards for these events? Nameplates are bad rewards, change my mind. We've got posts like this highlighting how the quality of the skins themselves, these are just recolors. They're not even unique skins for the event. They just changed the color palette of existing armor. And so this user said these event-specific skins in the marketplace should instead be a reward for completing it, given their low quality and given the fact that it is an event and there has to be something compelling to look forward to at the end of the tunnel. And the event itself, it was broken for some people. Some people could not progress past the first wave of enemies, leaving them stuck. Others experienced just the game not loading at all after the Red Room update, so they couldn't complete the event. And then there were those who could complete the event, but because of a bug, rewards for that event were not given to them after its completion. So for a number of reasons, there were some people out there who were screwed over, and Crystal Dynamics took no steps to compensate for this. They didn't offer compensation to these people. They didn't extend the event in any way. And the fact that there are temporary events or temporary content at all in a game that's substantially lacking content is baffling within its own right. And to top it all off, a lot of people were hoping that Marvel's Avengers would be working on a loot 2.0 or something along those lines, something to overhaul loot, because that's one of the areas where the game is sorely lacking, which is especially bad for a looter game. But it was confirmed that Marvel's Avengers isn't getting a definitive loot 2.0 patch, but rather updates over time, gradual updates that will tweak loot here and there, which a lot of people are seeing as just not enough to bring this game back. And so it's just bad news everywhere, and it's hard not to think that this game's fate is already sealed, that it's headed down the path of Anthem, unless, again, the War for Wakanda expansion somehow works a miracle. I guess we will see more about that at E3. The Marvel's Avengers official Twitter page confirmed that we can tune in to Square Enix Presents at E3 2021 on June 13th for a glimpse at upcoming events and the Marvel's Avengers expansion Black Panther: War for Wakanda. So we'll see just how much this expansion adds, whether what they show is exciting enough to revitalize this game. And while I do think that we're going to see a spike in the player base once that DLC launches, the question is, again, can that player base be maintained, and can we make it so that the player base doesn't peak at just a little over 1,000 or maybe 2,000 players and then go back down to the triple digits once the luster of that is lost? I don't think it will. Beyond just the lack of content, I think this game is just flawed on a foundational core level, and unless they fix that, I just don't think this game will be too interesting for a lot of people. But time will tell, I suppose. E3 and War for Wakanda is gonna be Marvel's Avengers' last chance to find some semblance of success from all this, because Square Enix has lost money from this. They've confirmed that they've not made their money back months back, and unless they find a way to bring it back, that financial loss will continue, which means that they will kill it at some point if this course ensues. But again, time will tell. In the meantime, let me know in the comments below what you think about Marvel's Avengers, the current state of the game. Do you think it can make a comeback? Are you looking for War for Wakanda? Or have you long moved past Marvel's Avengers and don't see much hope for it? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.